Hi, good evening, everybody. I'll call this council listening session to order tonight. We have Sally Ness signed up to speak to us. Good evening, Sally, and welcome. And with nobody else signed up, we'll look for that. We'll aim for that 10-minute mark.
Thanks. Tonight, I am reading some of what I emailed the city on January 17, 2023, concerning the upcoming request for colleges in R1 zone to add retail and medical offices. In the email, I questioned why the city would be able to change city code for a chiropractic college to allow previous unapproved uses, but not a technical school, public school, nursing home, and other institutional uses. Each application would be judged on its own merits, and if the results were similar to the chiropractic college, would the city be able to decline another institutional use request? And about judging the request on the merits of the property making the request, that is a concern. Even though it is a privately initiated city code amendment, it changes uses within a zone. It does not make sense that the city processes a city code change with a focus on the individual property and not all the properties within the zone and the effect it has on other zones. Data points out that Northwestern, like other colleges, were affected by COVID, and this offers a financial solution for the college, but does not provide data concerning other properties. Is there a shortage of office and retail space in the city? That should be the reason for changing uses in the zone, not an individual need. Has the city already determined that it needs more land for offices and retail, and that that land should be located in the R1 zone? Similar to the recent city code change in the FD-2 zone, where the focus was on the individual needs of a property owner and not the city as a whole, there was no discussion whether the city has too much land designated for industrial needs. The city zones are for land balance concerns and to preserve needs within zones such as industrial zone districts for manufacturing and industrial. Currently, an accessory use cannot attract customers independently of the principal use, and the request PL 2022-240 changes that. In addition to concerns with balance and preserving land use needs, there's concern with the precedent the city is setting by allowing retail and medical offices in R1 and allowing a request that concerns itself with the property's long-term success. The previous reply received from the city stated, staff does not believe that allowing complementary medical office or complementary retail uses in conjunction with colleges as proposed to be defined by the applicant and subject to standards would create a precedent that would require allowing medical office or retail uses in conjunction with other types of institutional uses. This change is to R1 zone property and is allowing uses previously not allowed, and the city should know whether it creates a precedent or not. The college is struggling today. That does not mean it will struggle in the future, and that hybrid classes will remain hybrid and that traffic and parking will not increase. Even if it is not anticipated to substantially increase the parking demand for this college, it does not mean it would not for another college. If the city allows an added use in R1 due to financial concerns, why not allow other uses due to financial concerns, such as the resident wanting to keep an existing garage or the resident that wanted to sell retail a couple weekends a year from her home? The city does not restrict hours for institutional uses, and yet, if passed, would be allowing retail and medical offices for institutional use in R1 without addressing hours. So discuss the question specifically, is the city short on retail and office space? And so going into our R1 zone is the solution to that.
I don't know if that's the question. I think the question is whether or not we would approve it in this specific instance as requested by the private organization. And you're concerned about precedents. You've asked that and staff has answered that.
Well, it said, I believe though, and that's a little different than, having example like we've passed this before and it didn't set a precedent and this is why this wouldn't set a precedent. Again, why would the city be able to just limit it to colleges and not if another institutional use asked? If our public school asked and said, we really are struggling here, we really want to help the kids out, we could really, having a medical office in our facilities would help us financially and help the students. The school wouldn't be able to come and say, you know, you set a precedent with allowing it for the chiropractic college. Why, you know, I would like to know, not just that you believe it wouldn't set a precedent, but why wouldn't it? Why would the city be able to go, well, that's a different case because specifically why? Why is that a different case?
Without a different case to compare it to, I can't tell you exactly why it's a different case, but I can tell you there are plenty of examples of one thing happening, not necessarily setting precedent to be applied across the city. That's not an uncommon thing to happen.
Well, what would you say to the school? You would say, well, the chiropractor college, we approved it because they had a need. We didn't see the increase in traffic. Their numbers are down. You know, the space, they limited to 20%. So the school coming back with that same discussion.
Bloomington Public Schools came to us with that request. We'd have a good conversation with Bloomington Public Schools, exactly what they wanted to accomplish and how it might work.
Right. And so instead of saying you believe it wouldn't set a precedent, how would we know definitively that this, you know, or even thinking of our home care facilities, you know, they're struggling as well. I mean, it would help for them to put a medical office in their facilities versus, you know, having to pack up, you know.
And I believe is an apples to Cadillacs comparison, and I don't think it's at all applicable. So staff has answered your question.
Well, I know.
About precedents. Staff has answered the question.
Again, it's within, I believe, and I would like staff to be more definitive. I would like more language that would, you know, solidify it.
Mr. Verbrugge?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think when staff is saying that, Sally, what they're saying is essentially this is how we would base a recommendation if this issue were to come to council. Right? So staff can't ever really say definitively, because ultimately staff makes recommendations to the planning commissioner to the council, and the council has the authority to act and what they're going to do. So it really isn't up to staff other than to lay out, here's the rationale, here's what here's what the ordinance say, and here's what the law says, and here's how we've viewed these things. But after that, it becomes a policy decision of the governing body. So we can't say definitively, this is going to be the case.
So Mayor,
Yes.
I want to interrupt you here. I think this might help your perspective. I think sometimes folks confuse, you know, since the city council has a quasi judicial process by which that we operate sometimes, but we do not operate like like the Supreme Court on precedents. Certainly those folks who've been around on this council certainly will say, hey, you know, we've done it this way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to continue or should continue to do something the same way. It's always, as a manager, as appropriately stated, based on the facts of the situation by which that we find in the mayor said that too. And so I think we have to be careful. And I just love speculative stuff. I'm the king of that. And the mayor always reminds me, hey, we got to be careful with that. And so I would caution you, like I caution myself, not to speculate about what may come or what we just never know. I mean, and that's a hard thing to do. And if we try to tie the hands of those councils that come after us, circumstances may be different. So I think we just have to, and I know it's tough to do, trust me, because I'm there. I'm totally there with you. We got to be careful with that.
Well, when I listened to the city council meetings starting, you know, back when they were online and they're easy to, so I've read, listened, and the reason the council says no, for particular, the man who wanted to keep the garage, is you don't want to set a precedent. You don't want it so that others would keep the garage. The woman who was selling she had bought a business and she had asked the city, can she, you know, sell it from her garage a couple times a year, just like someone who has a garage sale, and was told yes. But then after she bought the business, she was told no, because you're selling new stuff, something like that. And then again, it was, we don't want to set that precedent. So.
And I'm going to let Councilmember Nelson ask his question, but I'm going to say, Sally, none of those things have anything to do with Northwestern Health Sciences request here. None of those things have anything to do with that. So Councilmember Nelson?
Not really a question, but just to your first one with the garage. is dictated by state law. It was a variance, and the state law forbids us from considering financial considerations in that. It's a variance process. It got changed many years ago in terms of how that is done. We explicitly cannot consider the financial impact of that decision. So that is
Yeah.
oranges and Cadillacs.
Apples to Cadillac.
Apples and Cadillacs.
But that is what's being considered. So you can for a city code, but you can't for a variance? Okay.
On a variance, yeah.
Okay, because I do know, like, for instance, when when Darrell Farouk was going in with Success Academy and there was the comment, like, how many students you need to be financially solvent or something like that. And I do know that question for that at that time was inappropriate, that their financial concerns isn't the city council's concerns. So I'm surprised that it is for a city code, which doesn't make sense because the city code is changing the entire zone. So we can consider this one person's financial concerns and it changes the entire zone versus the other one. It just changes the one person. So some of this isn't,
Sally,
No.
past our-
Much more
Okay.
discussion on those.
thanks.
past our 10 minutes. Thank you, Sally. So you're just here for a little one-on-one time with Councilmember Lohman?
Yeah.
Very good. No one else?
Padded room.
I've already done that option once. It did not come out well.
We have no one else.
Okay, so obviously you have like a closed caption on this. You just wanted to watch it all over. I'm going for it
We
again.
have no one else stepping forward to speak at our listening session. Council, I look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn our listening session this evening. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 6-5-0. We are adjourned.